welcome to a special end of year episode of Control Alt Access. I'm one of your hosts, Laura. I'm here as ever with my lovely co-host Arevia. How you doing?
Hello, I'm doing okay. How are you today, Laura?
I'm doing all right. I'm a little bit tired, but I'm glad to be wrapping up a lot of my work for the year. It's sort of
Yes,
getting toward the end of year now.
it feels weird. You just told me we have been doing this for around 6 months now, and the end of our
Yeah.
first year or first 6 months. And damn, it's been a time.
The time has flown by though, hasn't it? It doesn't feel like we've been doing it that long, but yeah, we started around the summer of this year, back in I think like May, June. Like I think
Yeah,
it was just before Summer Games Fest and everything we started. And
yeah. Technically, we recorded our first episode during the first GA Conf.
yes, we did
Yes,
a little live one at GA Conf. I think we might have done one proper episode before GA Conf started, I think.
yes.
And did a little 1.5 there, but yeah, it's been lovely, and we've got our first year of doing of this show being a thing is over, and we thought, what better way to wrap up this year than just have a little chat about 2024 and the various accessibility things that kind of stood out to us this year.
Yes. Uh,
Did
like both of
Right?
us just got quiet, just the respect of like who who is going to talk next. I,
Yeah, did you have anything anyway you wanted to start?
I was going to ask if you watched the Game Awards and if you saw that Prince of Persia won the
I did see,
yeah.
yeah. I think both of us are in agreement that like that is a very deserving winner for accessibility innovation. We
Yes.
both have very significant emotional connections to what that game did accessibility
Yep.
wise.
And I
Um,
I think all of them did well, and if anybody listening will want to
yeah.
go and check them out, like you can go and read why they were nominated, and there was good reasons. Like there's good well documented reason for why they were
Mm,
nominated. But I think the memory shard thing is just so genius, and so it's so simple, but it's still so good and well made. And I
yeah.
was following. I didn't catch the Game Awards live because it was in the middle of the night, but I did
Mm,
watch other streamers the day after watch it and
yeah.
see people that aren't like even in the accessibility, like they have no connection to the accessibility industry. They don't know anything
Mm,
about it. And when they like saw that this one and they started talking about the memory shards, they were just like, "Hey, I didn't know that was accessibility, but that was really, really genius. I also use that." And for me, that meant a
yeah.
lot.
Yeah, that's a feature that like this game came out before we started recording Control Alt Access, but for anyone who's unaware of the feature, um Prince of Persia: The Lost Crown is a side-scrolling Metroidvania, and once you've unlocked the feature at any time you can take a screenshot and pin it to your in-game map.
Yeah.
So if you're trying to remember, like, oh, I put a pin on the map of like this room has something important in it. I don't remember exactly what was important in there. You can look at a literal screenshot and go, oh, that's what that room was.
Yeah.
Um, Really great for cognitive accessibility. As someone with aphantasia, I so appreciated that feature as someone that cannot do visual imagination and memory recall properly. Um, but yeah, it's a feature that like isn't in the settings as like an accessibility setting, but it's just a thing introduced by a character as a gameplay feature during regular
Yeah.
play. And it is really interesting how many people don't think of it as an accessibility feature until you point it out to
Yeah.
them,
And
despite it being such a crucially useful feature.
and I technically like I think it's a bit sad right now. I think it's a bit sad that people don't understand it because it's sort of uh then it can't be like yet another win for accessibility in the form
Mm,
of like, see, this is yet another thing that is good. But for the long run, this is actually what I want for the gaming industry. I
mm,
want it to be so comfortable that anybody can use accessibility. We still know that there is sort of a stigma. I think I want to call it a stigma for like, no, no, no,
yeah.
this is not for me. I'm not going to use these options because these are not for me. So when
Oh.
it's baked into good and well rounded game design, it's just people use it.
Yeah. One thing I wanted to talk about from like 2024 that like now that the year's wrapping to a close, this year was a really good year for like high contrast mode support in games from
Yeah.
like studios and publishers that haven't done it before, continuing to pick up steam. And that was something that like there's a lot of studios and developers and publishers that had their first time using supporting the feature this year, and I want to highlight some of those because I think that's a really good step in the right direction for the industry. So going from the start of the year, Tekken 8 got high contrast mode, which was a first for a Namco Bandai published game. Prince of Persia: The Lost Crown.
Mhm.
That was the first Ubisoft game, I believe, to support high contrast mode. We got high contrast mode added to Jedi Survivor in a patch, which was the first EA example of the feature. Um, we got them added in a post-launch update to Spider-Man 2. We had them in. I'm scrolling through. There's a whole bunch of them. Some of the other big ones, Concord. Despite that game only being available for about 3
Oh
weeks, it was
yeah.
an online multiplayer shooter with high contrast outlines around characters. We saw it in stuff like Silent Hill 2, which
Yes.
was a first for Konami and for Bloober Team, and I'm tempted to say a first for like a proper survival horror game. You could maybe argue the Callisto Protocol, but
Yeah.
it's very rarely seen in like horror things.
Yes.
Just so many examples of like studios and genres picking up that feature for the first time, and that was really great to see.
That is fun to see. And I also feel like it has also been a year for cognitive accessibility. That is something
Mm,
like I have for years now heard and seen a lot about visual accessibility, especially high contrast mode. But as we talked about a million times before, it takes time before things like if you see something being implemented the first time today, you have to wait like 2 to 6 years before you see other games implemented if it is
mm.
a complex thing to implement due to the fact that it needs to be
Games
in
take a while,
yeah it
yeah.
needs to be implemented early enough in the game phase so it actually can be done. And
Hmm.
so like I feel like we are seeing now the like more of the entail of that wave, and I think that is really really fun. And it's also cool that it seems like smaller teams are trying it when we before saw it from larger teams. We have seen a bit
Yeah.
smaller teams, some indie games have tried it and done okay with it. I can't remember the name right now, but we have seen some indie game also trying it and it works.
Hmm.
But I also feel that before, when I talked about things like cognitive load and I talked about things like
Hmm.
not understanding, not like just like feeling lost in game, people were just like, but
Yeah.
why? Like the cognitive, it's hard to explain, but cognitive accessibility, at least I feel, still has a lot of stigma. People are scarily afraid of feeling dumb.
Yeah.
And it's like as somebody who literally have problems with that, it is
Hmm.
sad because I see a lot of even people in our own community who goes like, well, I might be X, Y, and Z. I might like missing a hand. I might be in a wheelchair. I might do X, Y, and Z.
Yeah.
And then they say, but at least my brain is functioning. And I'm sitting there going like, well, cool for
Yeah.
you, but mine aren't. But this
Yeah.
year, I have sort of had a lot of experience where I feel like I'm young again. Experience like when I played Prince of Persia, when I played like
Hmm.
a lot of games that like got me to feel like I am just a gamer again because the game actually gave me the tools to not get cognitive overload or just be so having so much problems thinking about what I was supposed to do that I felt bad about myself. I just felt like a gamer.
Yeah.
And it's
It
also yeah, Laura.
yeah. It's one of those things where I'm trying to think of like good examples of steps forward on that cognitive accessibility front that we saw this year, and one of them that I keep thinking about is if you look at say 2020 through 2022, maybe 2023, a lot of games were following the blueprint set out by The Last of Us Part
Yeah.
2, which admittedly is impressive in a lot of
Oh
ways, but that
yes.
sort of popularized the idea of if you're going to do presets for accessibility and think about accessibility categories, that game presented motor, vision, and hearing as the categories
Yeah.
of disability that you might support for. And this year is the first year I've really remembered seeing examples of like cognitive accessibility
Yes.
presets starting to show up, and talks from developers at things like GA Conf, including cognitive accessibility as a fourth pillar they talk
Yes.
about alongside motor, vision, and hearing. And it has felt like it's being taken more seriously, for sure.
And it's also feel like it's less shame around it. First, I have seen less stigma from my own community, but also from developers. I think this also might have with doing, the older we get, everybody will experience cognitive,
Yeah.
some sort of cognitive effect. I'm not going to call it a loss. I'm not going to call it, because it doesn't need to be serious. It's just an effect. Either
Yeah.
if I've seen a lot of, especially from people that are first time parents, experience it because they are maybe sleep
Yes.
deprived, they maybe have gone through something really really painful, that can be childbirth,
Yeah.
and they are now experience what I experience a lot, which is that like you can't always trust your brain to be there for you.
Yeah.
And it's sort of, for I feel like, at least for a lot of people, it's gone like a light bulb up and going like, hey, this actually is something that affects all of us. And we have talked about it on this podcast, that if you have a physical thing that is wrong with you, like just a physical thing, this is like, say, arthritis, or you have lost a leg, or you have IBS. Yes, those are physical, period. But the fact that you have to stress with pain management, the fact that you have to sleep more, all of these things will have a cognitive effect on you. So even though your illness or disability technically isn't anything to do with cognitive, it does cognitive affect you. And that will, you will see that when you game. So I'm glad to see that we are stopping to believe that, yeah, you are less of if your brain doesn't work as clockwork as it did when you were 15, or that even though you forget things, you are still worthy of playing games, and you are still worthy of
Yeah.
taking part of this. And I'm really happy to see it. I hope we continue with that, but only time will
Agreed.
see. Yeah.
Yeah. Other things that definitely picked up steam this year that I think it's worth like highlighting and acknowledging is audio descriptions in games have become increasingly more common this year,
Yes.
and there's maybe still room for improvement with them, in as much as most of the implementations that exist at this point are still focused on static cutscenes that are sort of pre-rendered, which makes sense. They're the points in a game where developers know exactly what's going to be happening and the pacing it's going to happen at.
Yeah.
Um, but you can look at examples like, I think at the end of last year, The Last of Us Part 1 remaster was like definitely the thing that set the ball rolling. But this year we saw like a lot of Sony first party PlayStation games picking that up as a more common feature. We saw it in the Last of Us Part 2 remaster. We saw it added to Spider-Man 2 in a post-launch update. But we also saw it in stuff like what's the one I'm thinking of? There's another one that added it. We saw it in stuff like Forza. We saw it being added to like fighting games are starting to add it to some of their cutscenes. We are getting to a point where that is a more common conversation. I think it was Jedi Outlaws
Yep.
that not only added it this year, but I believe Steve Saylor did the audio description for Jabba the Hutt in that
Yeah.
game, and that was a really nice example of getting someone from the accessibility community in to be a part of making that happen. I'm really glad we are starting to see that become more common as time goes on.
And I'm also glad, one thing I'm glad for is this understanding that, well, at least I have started noticing this, that when you have a voiceover, or when you have audio description, the understanding that you can have in different people doing different things. So in Star Wars Outlaws, you had different people doing different things, making it a more of a fun thing to listen to. We were at GFConf when we learned from, I sadly cannot remember the name, but they had a brilliant talk talking about how like everything sound the same if you're blind. in the form of like all your screen readers, everything, like audio description, everything has the same tone,
yes.
the same
This
voice.
was the talk from the London GA conf earlier in
Yes.
the year, wasn't it?
Yes.
Check our GA conf, like episode 1 or 2 recap
Yep.
if you want to find more about that. But yeah, it is nice we're seeing it not just be one monotone voice that narrates everything.
And it is cool to see, because one of the funnest thing with game development is the possibility to be creative, is the possibility to do something, to test yourself, to try to like go to new strides. And it's something we have been seeing now, that yeah, hey, you can actually have fun with this. Yes, it might be a lesser part of your audience, or less people in your audience that will see it, but that doesn't mean you shouldn't do fun things with it and have fun and invite people in and stuff like that. So that's really, really cool.
Yeah. I want to talk a little bit about one of my favorite examples of like one game doing a cool thing this year that I really want to highlight. And I think this might also have been before we started doing Ctrl-Alt-Access. I want to talk about Hellblade 2.
Yeah.
So for anyone who's not played the series, Hellblade and Hellblade 2 are games that follow the story of Senua, who is a person who is living with psychosis. And the first game is very much a game about exploring a world that is largely Senua's own visual and auditory hallucinations, and in Hellblade 2, it's more that you are exploring the outside world with visual and audio hallucinations happening sort of on top of the external world. And one of the things that was really cool about the first Hellblade was that if you're someone that is able to hear and plays the game with headphones on, the way that Senua's hallucinations were handled is 3D audio of multiple voices whispering from all around you in sort of 3D space. But subtitles didn't really convey that. Hellblade 2, first of all, really great that there's, in the extras menu for that game, you can go watch a documentary about how they worked with consultants with psychosis to be authentic in that representation. But in terms of mechanical stuff, they had a system with their subtitles that appear on, like, 2 different lines, where the bottom line is always things that are being said out loud, or Senua's main internal monologue, and the top line is the hallucinated whispers around her that can appear on the left, middle, or right of that row. So you can have multiple whispered hallucinations happening at once, overlapping each other, and just by subtitles you can see where they're coming from, and you can get the experience of multiple voices sort of overlapping each other. And I thought that was just so interesting, such a cool way of handling that.
Again, it's about like being creative and understanding that accessibility can just like literally enhance what you wanted to showcase with your game. It isn't just for us, it can also be for the developers, and so cool. It's so cool.
Yeah. Did you have any other things you wanted to jump over to?
I am thinking a bit about that. I have seen a lot of cool things from indie games this year. I'm a big fan of indie games, and it is just how it is. Making a game when you have limited budget that 99% of all indie game developers have, it's hard already, and then you are then going to want to do something extra, which often is accessibility. But I've seen so many this year trying new things, understanding that they can add things, understanding that they can have fun with this, and taking a risk, because it is a risk. In the end of making a game, it is, you have a timeline and you need money for that whole timeline, and things are needing to be cut at the end of it. And a lot of times, sadly, that is accessibility. But then to see small indie games developers just going, no, we're actually going to keep this, that has been really, really cool. I've seen a lot of cool. Ultros did a lot of cool things with like high contrast mode. And we had like Little Guardsmen did a lot of cool things. Laudonaut did a lot of cool things that I remember. Snufkin, Botany Manor. What was that? The one that we got sent. Oh, I can't remember. Plucky Spire? Was that one?
The Plucky Squire.
Yes.
Yeah, there was what was there? There was Pine Hearts
Pine
this
Hearts,
year.
yes.
What was that one that this year that during a Nintendo Direct they talked about their accessibility options very briefly.
Oh, that game. Oh, I can't remember what it was.
I think it was about doing like sewing patterns or something, and there were
Yes.
some options.
Yeah,
Yeah.
it was colorblind mode in the sewing pattern game. It's
Mm.
Stitch something something. That was
Yeah,
cool.
I'll try and find it and put it in the video description for this episode, but yeah, it was great not only seeing like more indie developers putting accessibility into their games, but also using promotional space that they had to talk about
Yes.
accessibility. Just that's the reason I like that example from Nintendo Direct was they only had a 45-second or so trailer, but they used some of that time to talk about accessibility.
Mhm.
The Whitethorn Games showcase way earlier at the start of the year um, took time during basically almost all of the trailers to talk about
Yeah.
accessibility in the games they were publishing. And it's nice seeing indie studios and publishers moving toward that model of being open and transparent early about accessibility when they have a chance.
Yeah. We also have somebody that I really, really want to pull forward. I'm not sure if they are considered indie or maybe a 1 or 2A,
Hmm.
something around there. But that was, of course, another Crab's Treasure with their
Yeah.
amazing way of looking at easy mode or God mode in a game. If you haven't played it,
Mm.
this is a game where it's a Souls-like game where you play as a crab and you're like running around at the bottom of the ocean and doing crab stuff and fighting other aquarian things. And if you can't do it, you can put on God mode and you can exit this whenever, and that just straps a gun to your crab, and then you
Yeah,
can
you've
shoot everything one shot.
literally anything, including bosses, will die in a single shot from the
Anything,
gun.
anything.
But I like that that was there alongside more granular stuff that reminded me a lot of games like Celeste from a few years ago, where
Yeah,
it's like, hey, do you just want to like tweak the game speed a little so that you have
yeah,
more reaction time? Do you want a little bit more durability on your shell? Do you want to have faster regeneration of your sort of magic meter? Or a slightly more forgiving window for your dodges or your parries? There was a lot of really nice granular stuff for do I want this to still be challenging but to be overcomable for me? But
yes,
at the top end, it's like, hey, no shame. Do you just want a gun and shoot that
yeah.
thing? You get to keep seeing the story, and I'm like, that's lovely.
And
I won't pretend I didn't occasionally turn the gun on just to go. I just want to shoot that thing and keep going.
and it was so genius also because they are so seriously, but aren't so serious that I can't have fun. Because a lot of their marketing
Yeah,
went on, hey, what if you just want to have a crab with a gun? Like they literally made
yeah.
it into fun marketing. Twitter were boiling. TikTok were boiling with clips of people just having fun.
Hmm.
And it's opening that like way of people looking at accessibility. So indie, I think like well done. It's sort of been the year for you guys. You're doing a lot of cool things, and yeah, it's just been really, really cool. There was
Hmm.
one more thing I was thinking about, but
Yeah.
sadly I can't remember what it was. Typical me though. Um
I mean that'll be the memory issues and cognitive accessibility we've got going on here.
yes. This is why I should always write down everything before I start. No, sadly I can't remember what it was. It was something.
That's fine. We're having a casual end of year. We're not going to stress about it. I've got one I wanted to talk
Yeah.
about that I think was like a nice theme of this year. I'm really glad that we are seeing continued support for more kinds of accessibility controllers in the industry, and that the fact that that Xbox and PlayStation have their first party solutions hasn't stopped new interesting alternative options starting to
Yeah.
crop up. Like we talked about this on Control Alt Access right near the start of the show, but we had the Overjoyed accessibility controller, which allowed you to sort of map like mouse inputs or eye tracking to emulate controller inputs, and there was a sort of workaround to get that working on Switch. We had stuff like the Xbox Adaptive Joystick announced that's coming out in spring of 2025. The 8-bit Do Lite SE for Xbox. The Proteus controller, which I finally have my retail unit of the Proteus controller now.
Yay!
I'll be putting my review thoughts together probably early in 2025, early in the new year. But I will say, I've unboxed the new version of the Proteus controller, and the cubes turn on properly now.
Yay!
Hooray! So I can
Yay!
start using it. And I have 2 USB dongles, which means I can test using it as a split-handed controller, which I'm
Nice.
excited for. But like, yeah, I like that we are still seeing more accessible hardware being released that comes in different form factors, but also that we're seeing more updates to how those controllers that already exist work, with stuff like we talked about a couple of weeks ago, the Xbox Adaptive Controller this year having updates so that a bunch of new kinds of inputs will work with it.
Yep.
I'm glad that, like, we're not just going, you have an accessibility controller, you don't need more options for controllers, or you don't need them to
Yeah.
do more things.
Absolutely, and we also seen a lot of like smaller brands jumping on, trying new things, looking at new things, and I think it's cool. And also a lot of knickknack like Thumb Soldier and Xbox, like making things to already existing controllers, so that you don't necessarily
Yeah.
need to buy a lot of new stuff. I also dabble a lot into I don't dabble, but I look at a lot of 3D printing things because I have friends who do
Yeah.
that, and I've seen more and more like pop up with more 3D printing things. But
Yeah.
what I was going to say is that this year has also been a year for remakes. And
Yeah.
I wanted to highlight that because remakes are often criticized. People don't want it because they're just like, why am I going to buy a full price for a game that I already own? And the fact is that, well, good for you, but for a lot of us, we actually need modern controllers to be able to play the game, and we can't play it without. I played my favorite game from my childhood this year because it finally was released on a PS5. I could not have played that game without the PlayStation 5 Access controller. So due to
Yes, this was Tomba.
Yes, it was. Yes, it was.
Yeah.
And we also saw that with Silent Hill, actually. A lot of people saying, hey, I can actually play Silent Hill again because I just can't do that anymore. If that due to be age, time, or just like lack of technology, because like some people just don't have the money to go and get old school stuff. Those are expensive. And if you don't want to emulate it, it's expensive to get yourself a PS1 or a PS2 now.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
I think there are some remakes where I can more easily understand the frustration about. I think, like, an example from this year that I very much understand the frustration on is The Last of Us Part 2 Remastered, because undoubtedly that did bring a lot of really important accessibility updates to that game. But given that it's a game that only released 4 years ago, and that was already playable on PS5 with PS5 specific updates to it, that's one where I can look at it and go, I can see how it feels like being charged an upgrade fee to access accessibility features that maybe should have been added to the version of the game people already owned.
Yeah.
But I think you're very much right with stuff like Tomba, Silent Hill 2, much older games.
Yes.
That are either like less accessible on current hardware or have aged considerably more.
Yep.
It does make a really big difference bringing them forward. And if you can add new accessibility features to them at the same time, all the better.
Yeah, absolutely. But I was wondering, what are you looking forward to in then 2025? Like, what are your wishes for the next year? I have some.
So, yeah, I've been thinking about this a bit, because, like, in January, I'm probably going to be doing a video on this, as I've been thinking about it a little bit. I think big things I want to see next year largely revolve around the fact that Nintendo's going to have a new console out next year. And I want to see Nintendo, and maybe this is too optimistic, I want to see them enter the new console generation and use that as an opportunity to step up and catch up with Xbox and PlayStation a little bit
Yeah.
on some accessibility stuff.
Yep.
I want to see them use this as an opportunity to be more up to date with things that would otherwise be standards.
Yeah.
Like, I would love to see the first Nintendo published game to support high contrast mode next year. I think that would go a really strong way to signifying to the industry that this should be a standard feature.
Mm-hmm.
Other than that, I would really like to see a AAA game attempt to do audio descriptions outside of cutscenes, even if just here and there when you the way that in-game conversations are triggered when you walk over certain points in-game through invisible triggers, having a couple of those set up to try having audio description where you know the character's in a specific position that you know they're going to pass through. Those are the first two things that jump to the top of my head that I would really like to see happen next year that feel like very achievable things.
I also have some maybe in a train of Nintendo that I feel is as far-fetched but also as wanted, and that is that I would absolutely wish to see that we can use the PS access on the PC. I know somebody has commented on our show before, but you can use it. And now I'm meaning a fully integrated version from PlayStation, not doing it yourself. I have tried.
there is a pretty good the community has created a pretty good program for tricking it into working. But that's not a replacement for an officially supported one that you can rely on not doing any damage to your controller.
And
that's easy to use.
And even though I sit on computer a lot, there is a level of knowledge you have to have and understand to just download it. And a lot of people just don't want to download things they don't know if they can trust. Of course, I think now that this is safe, and because a lot of people in our community use it, but you never know, and I can understand people just being nope.
It's no replacement for something official that a person can look at and go, I know that without having to do research, I know I can trust that.
Yes, and I'm not taking away from the people who are working on this. It's really, really good work. I'm not saying anything about that. That is well done, but I wish we could see it from PlayStation. That would be a dream for me. If I could start using the access controller on my PC, because then their joystick is so much better, because I have a controller that I also use, and I often use my hand flat on the controller, but just to have a big joystick that doesn't move as much, because the controller moves so much when I use my whole hand with it. So I hope, I'm crossing fingers, but I to be honest, sadly think it is as far-fetched as Nintendo. I don't have hope for their Switch 2. I am hoping, but it is a big hope.
I'm not putting any big hopes on Nintendo, but it would be really positive to see at the very least something I'm trying to think of examples off the top of my head that are currently standards on PlayStation and Xbox, but that Nintendo doesn't support. Something like co-pilot mode support for using multiple controllers as if they were one user. Having support for let's say that the eShop on the Switch 2 had accessibility store tags or a games that have accessibility featured section. Things that if Nintendo did, we could go, every console maker is doing this. This is a standard now.
Would be amazing. Hold to toggle on each button. I want that.
Yeah. If I was going to talk, this will never happen, but, a thing that I think would be a real sign of proper industry unity and understanding of accessibility would be some kind of pledge between the three console makers to allow for officially using each other's controllers on each other's consoles. And going, even if we don't support, third-party controllers, if we go, each of our consoles has the drivers for like official PlayStation controllers, official Xbox controllers, official Nintendo controllers. You can use the official controllers on all three boxes. We recognize that that is what's best for players. I don't think that will happen, but I think that is the kind of move that I dream of seeing as like a proper. Some things are more important than the divisions between us. This is a place where we have to come together for the better of disabled players.
Yep.
I don't think it'll happen,
So,
but I would
but
love
it would
it.
be the dream, though. It would be the dream.
Yeah.
One thing I hope to see, which is a lot more technical, this is like for the industry, accessibility industry, is that a lot of the time when we talk about accessibility, we say that there are 5 categories of accessibility. We say, so there is vision, auditory, motor, cognitive, and communication.
Yeah.
And I wish that there is a twofold wish for this. I wish for once that a lot of times people lump some mental health and cognitive together. I understand why they do that, because it's both is in your head, right? It's in this part of your body, so we're just going to keep it in here.
Yeah.
They don't. They aren't the same. I as somebody who both have PTSD and have some cognitive, they're not the same. They can affect each other as all of their other categories can affect each other. They are not the same. Yes, you can have forgetfulness because you have depression or ADHD or autism, or you can have PTSD can give you forgetfulness, but you can also have forgetfulness because you have a lot of pain from a motor accessibility or barrier.
Yeah.
So I wish that mental health can be its own category, and it's not because I want it to be segregated. It's not because I don't like it to be together, but it is to make a clarity for developers, because a lot of times developers comes to me and go like, we have cognitive accessibility, and I go like, yeah, and then they're just like, yes, we have trigger warnings. And I'm just like, this is really cool and I love it for you. This is like, trigger warnings is one of the coolest things I know, but it doesn't help me cognitive. It helped my PTSD. Maybe I'm wrong here. Maybe I am looking at it wrong, but I don't look at cognitive and my PTSD as the same thing. I'm looking at as two separate. It's mental health and it's cognitive accessibility. It's two different things, at least in my brain. What do you think about that?
I agree. I think that is a really great suggestion. The only other thing that I have off the top of my head for like things I would love to see for next year is I have 2 like personal accessibility features that I want to see someone try. One of them is one that I've been pushing for a couple of years, and I want to see someone be the first developer to do it. One is one I heard of from someone else, and I think is a fantastic idea I'd love to see someone attempt. First one, this is the feature I've been pushing for a while, and I want to see someone try, is having tone indicators as an optional subtitle option for autistic players who would benefit from non-verbal subtext and tone indicators as a way for being able to more easily cognitively process the intended meaning of a line of dialogue that was given, like what intention was there in terms of the tone delivery. That's one I would love to see done. I would love to see someone attempt doing that in games. The other one is one that I heard this brought up at the Develop Conference little mini accessibility talks thing that happened earlier this year. Cameron from PlayStation, who leads their sort of UK and Europe accessibility stuff, was talking about the idea of doing, if you can't implement like sign language in your game like say Forza did, having an option to have subtitles where the English words are written in the grammar and syntax order of say British Sign Language, as a way to make it easier for someone who, let's say British Sign Language is your first language, you can read written English but the sentence structure is a second language for you. instead having those English words, like taking out the words that aren't said in BSL, putting them in the order and the structure that BSL uses,
Yep.
is one fewer bit of translation you have to do in your head and can make it quicker for someone whose first language is BSL to read subtitles. I thought that was a fucking fantastic idea, and I would love to see someone attempt that.
That would be fun to see. I think
Yeah.
I think in the like last thing I wish to see for 2025, I like your ideas and I hope somebody is brave enough to take them on, or like I dare them to be the first, because that would be cool. And truth be told though, if you are a developer in here and you do something for the first time, you will be remembered for it. I'm just saying.
Yeah.
What I also wish for 2025 is that we talked about like this year being like a lot of high contrast mode for vision accessibility and a lot of cognitive accessibility. I wish we could see more for communication accessibility. This is not something I struggle with myself, but when I travel around, I talk to a lot of kids and teenagers because I travel around on events and I showcase accessibility for people and for families and kids and everything that comes and can test equipment. And I do like out in the world kind of work.
Yeah.
And one of the things I a lot of times meet is autistic children, children with autism, children with ADHD, who have barriers when it comes to communication, that want to play with their friends. They want to communicate in multiplayer games like Roblox and all of these kind of games that are popular among children. A lot of them do, or kids, teenagers, play games where you communicate with each other and their friends are on Discord, but they have selective mutism that they are mute and they're just sitting there. And
I would love to see some kind of official plugin support for like for example, being able to use an AAC device, which for anyone who doesn't know, those are usually touchscreen inputs where you have various icons that can be used to access certain words being played out. Some kind of way to sync an AAC device either with a game or with Discord to have its outputs automatically go through game chat would be a really interesting thing to see tackled.
It would. And like the only game I can think about who I feel have done really well with communication accessibility is actually Rocket League, because then you have the possibility you can't if you can't talk to each other, you have so many predetermined things you can say to each other that includes also swear words and quote unquote bad words, which is so important. Is communication includes also the communication we don't want to hear. And I think that is important. I wish more games would look at that, especially, are you a multiplayer game? Are you thinking about this like being a game for people to come together as a community? How are they going to communicate then as a community?
If your players who are using voice chat can get frustrated at the end of the match and shout the word fuck very loudly, but players who are typing, because perhaps they are nonverbal, are typing and the word fuck gets censored, that is an issue, and it is something you kind of need to think about, like, are you making sure that people with disabilities who might be communicating in different ways are still able to be rude if speaking players are?
Yes, and I think that is, I don't know if our game world is ready to have that talk, but it is a talk that we need to have at some point. That, well, sort of like, if you can shout it, you should be able to write it. Consequences should be the same though. So if you are a dick in chat and you are a dick in voice, both of them should get booted out. But I think that is, I'm looking forward to see bigger games. I'm looking forward to see games that, especially that are all around that bonding sequence, do something other than emo chat and dancing in game. I don't know. We have like sort of something like Palia had at Final Fantasy, where you can like do, your character can do things like they can bow, they can do hearts, they can dance and stuff like that. I just want to see that taken to the next level.
Agreed. Also, there's a couple of things that we haven't talked about on this show that happened since last episode that I do want to bring up. Like, I know we're not doing like a normal news segment this week,
Mhm.
but there's a couple of things that I just wanted to make sure we did talk about on this show because I think it's a couple of really neat things that have ended out the year. One of them is that the Royal National Institute of Blind People, which is a charity here in the UK, has announced the formation of something called the Design for Every Gamer player panel, as well as the Best Practice in Accessible Gaming Dev Kit 2024. Um, Basically, they have a panel of blind gamers of varying kinds that are available for playtesting and helping to assess accessibility for games, as well as a dev kit that has information and tools and resources for learning to make your games accessible for blind players, as well as a playable game called Spectrum Shift, showing off how various blind player accessibility features work in games and teaching how to implement them. That's a really cool thing. Really glad to see that. More power to them. And the other one, and this kind of goes to things that I look forward to seeing in 2024, is in 2025, is EA has continued their accessibility patent pledge, where they make several of their patents available for other people to use and make some of their software they've developed in-house in studio available open source. One of those I think is really cool this year is we've talked before about Iris, which is EA's open source program for helping to detect potential photosensitivity triggers. They've made a version of it that works in Unreal Engine 5 as a plugin in real time. So if you're developing a game in Unreal Engine 5 and you use this open source plugin, it will tell you in real time while you are making and testing the game. It'll flash up alerts to go, that thing that just happened on screen is a potential photosensitivity issue, like in real time while you're working on the game. And that's such a cool thing to
Yep.
just be available industry wide.
Yep.
And I look forward to seeing what they do next year because, like, EA, honestly, as skeptical as I was when they started this pledge a few years ago, they've really put their money where their mouth is to, like, work on software that is useful for the whole industry and to just make it available for anyone to use. So yeah, did we have anything else we wanted to talk about? Either from this year or looking forward?
I think we have rounded it up nicely. I think we have.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I reckon so. So yeah, we're probably not going to be doing another episode this year. I think we're going to take at least a couple of weeks off over the festive break.
Yes. Holiday break.
Yeah.
Woohoo.
Exactly. So don't expect another episode from us now, but in about a month's time we'll come back in January and continue this all over again. Arevia, if people want to follow more of what you do, where can they find you on the internet?
They can find me Arevia everywhere except for TikTok because somebody stole my name. There I am, Arevia Gaming. And Laura, where can people find you?
I'm at Laura K Buzz pretty much everywhere on the internet. I've got good unified branding. Just search for Laura K Buzz.
And I'll see you all next year.
Goodbye.
Goodbye.